10 years after saving 3 Apache women, they returned with a merriest request. Cowboy's shocking answer. The bullet hit the dirt 6 inches from his boot before he even heard the shot. Cole Reyes did not flinch. He pulled his hat low and kept walking toward the tree line, one hand steady near the iron on his hip, eyes already scanning the ridge above. 3 riders, maybe 4. They were bad at staying hidden, which meant they were not worried about being found out. That was the worst kind of trouble. He was 2 days out from Santa Rosa, riding through the broken canyon country of New Mexico, hauling nothing more than a bedroll and a letter he had been paid to deliver. Simple work, the kind that kept a man fed and out of other men's business. But somewhere between a mesa and the dry creek bed, he had crossed into someone else's problem, and now that problem had guns. A second shot cracked off the ridge. This one was closer. They were walking the shots in, testing his nerve, seeing if he would run. Cole crouched behind a boulder and drew his revolver. He counted heartbeats instead of seconds. 6 of them. Then he came around the left side of the rock low and fast, and he fired twice at the nearest rider on the ridge. The man dropped from the saddle, and the horse bolted south. The other 2 riders pulled back hard and disappeared behind the crest. Cole did not chase them. Chasing men on high ground was how you ended up dead in a ditch. He moved fast to the east instead, cutting through a narrow wash where the walls were close and the sky was a thin blue stripe overhead. His horse, a dark roan named Peso, was tied to a cedar back near the trail. He reached the animal and kept moving without stopping, pushing deeper into the canyon. He heard it before he saw it. A sound like a fire that had been burning a long time, and under it, voices. Not voices talking, voices begging. Cole came around a bend and stopped cold. A ravine opened up to his right, and at the bottom of it, 3 women were tied to wooden stakes driven into the sand. Around them, the remains of a burned camp. A mule lay dead near the fire pit. Scattered pots and blankets and broken pottery told him everything he needed to know about who these women were. Apache, and someone had taken them alive, tied them here, and left them in the sun like bait or like punishment. Maybe both. The men on the ridge. They had not been shooting at Cole by accident. They had been watching the women, and he had walked right into their perimeter. He scanned the ravine edges. Nothing moving. He went down fast, keeping low, and reached the first woman. She was young, maybe 20, with a deep cut along her jaw that had dried dark. She looked at him without flinching, which told him plenty. He pulled out his knife and cut the rope at her wrists. She said something in Apache he did not understand. He shook his head and moved to the second woman. Older, maybe 40. Her wrists were rope-burned raw, and her lips were cracked from thirst. The third woman was barely conscious, slumped forward with her full weight on the stakes. Cole cut them all free and pulled the third woman upright. She was burning with fever. He had no idea how long they had been there. The older woman spoke to him in broken Spanish. She said the men who left them were bounty hunters working for a rancher named Caldwell, who had been pushing Apache families off the eastern grazing land for 2 years. They had taken the 3 of them to use as leverage against the band's elder. If the elder did not give up the land, the women would not come back. Cole listened. He gave the women water from his canteen and strips of dried meat from his saddlebag. Then he helped the sick woman onto Peso and led them all north on foot through the canyon. It took 4 hours to reach a place he recognized, a shallow river crossing near a stand of cottonwoods where he had camped before. He made a fire and boiled water and cleaned the sick woman's wounds as best he could. By nightfall, a group of Apache riders found them. 7 men, armed and moving hard. They came in with bows drawn and rifles raised, and Cole stood still with his hands open and his gun in the dirt. The older woman spoke quickly. The riders lowered their weapons. One man, tall and gray hair with a hawk feather in his hair, looked at Cole for a long time. Then he gave a single nod. They took the 3 women and rode into the dark. Cole picked up his gun, found his horse, and kept going towards Santa Rosa. He delivered the letter the next morning and did not think much about the canyon after that. Men like him moved through situations like that the way water moved through cracks in stone. You did not stop to wonder what you had done. You just kept moving. 10 years passed. Cole was not the same man in most of the ways that mattered. He was 40 now, with a streak of gray above his left ear and a limp that came and went depending on the weather. A reminder of a knife fight in Tucson 3 years back that he had won by the smallest margin possible. He had stopped taking delivery jobs and started working cattle for a rancher named Ortega outside of Albuquerque. Steady work. Quiet life. He had a small adobe house at the edge of the property, a dog named Trouble, and a routine he did not hate. He was mending fence along the eastern pasture on a Tuesday morning when Trouble started barking. Cole straightened up and looked south. 3 riders coming in from the desert, riding easy, not fast, not hunters, not Trouble either, he thought, until they got close enough that he recognized the way the lead rider sat her horse. It was the young woman from the ravine. She was 30 now, and the cut along her jaw had left a thin scar that had faded to silver. Beside her rode the older woman, who looked exactly the same as she had a decade ago, and the third woman, who had been sick, now riding straight-backed and healthy with a dark braid down her shoulder. Cole put down his fencing tool and waited. The young woman spoke first, in English this time, careful and clear. She said her name was Luna. She said the older woman beside her was her aunt, called Mara. She said the third woman was her cousin, called Petra. She said they had been looking for him for 2 years. Cole took off his hat and held it. He said he did not know he was the kind of man people looked for. Luna said he was wrong about that. She said her people remembered him. She said the elder who had sent the riders that night in the canyon had told the story many times. A lone cowboy with open hands and a gun in the dirt. She said her grandfather called him a man who chose not to shoot. Cole looked at the ground. He was not comfortable with that kind of talk. Then Luna said something that knocked the breath out of him clean and simple. She said that she and Mara and Petra had spoken together and among their families, and that they were asking him, formally and with full intention, if he would consider marriage to all 3 of them. The Apache way, one household, shared life, one bond. Cole stared at her. Then he looked at Mara, then at Petra. None of them were laughing. None of them were uncertain. They sat their horses like women who had already decided something, and were only waiting for him to catch up. He opened his mouth and closed it. He put his hat back on. He said he needed a moment. Luna said he could have as many moments as he needed. She said they had ridden a long way and were not in a hurry. Cole walked to the fence post and leaned against it. His dog Trouble came and sat on his boot. He looked out at the desert, which went on forever in that flat, honest way it always did, offering nothing and judging no one. He thought about his life as it was. The adobe house, the quiet mornings, the dog, the fence, the years that had gone by without anyone asking him for anything except to show up and do his work. He was not unhappy, but he was also not sure he was truly alive either. He had been moving through his days the way he had moved to the canyon that morning 10 years ago. Forward, cautious, not stopping. He turned around. He looked at Luna, who met his eyes without blinking. He looked at Mara, who had the calm face of a woman who had survived worse things than an awkward silence. He looked at Petra, who was watching Trouble the dog with something that might have been amusement. Cole said one question first. Luna said to ask it. He asked what had taken them 2 years to find him. Mara answered that one. She said they had found him in the first year. She said they had watched him for a while before deciding he was still the same man. She said they needed to be sure he had not become someone else. Cole thought about that for a long moment. He asked what they had seen that convinced them. Petra spoke for the first time. She had a low voice, and she spoke carefully. She said they had seen him stop a fight in a bar in Albuquerque without throwing a single punch. She said they had seen him give a month's pay to a family whose wagon had broken down on the road south. She said they had seen him carry an injured coyote off the road and set it loose in the brush instead of leaving it. She said small things told the truth about a man better than big ones. Cole looked at his dog again. Trouble looked back at him with the simple loyalty that dogs offered without condition or contract. He thought about the question in front of him. It was not a small question. It was not the kind of question a man could answer from habit or instinct or the part of himself that just wanted to keep moving. It required something he was not always sure he had. Stillness. The willingness to be somewhere instead of passing through. He asked if they understood what his life was. A working man's life. Not grand, not dangerous anymore, just honest and plain. Luna said that was exactly what they understood and exactly what they had come for. He asked if they knew he was not Apache and that he did not know their customs well. Mara said he would learn. She said she was patient. He asked if they had considered that he was not young and came with a limp and a dog named Trouble. Petra smiled at that. First real smile he had seen from her. She said Trouble was welcome. She said the limp only meant he had survived something. Cole was quiet for a long time. The sun moved. A hawk turned slow circles above the eastern pasture. The fence he had been mending stood half-finished behind him. Boards and wire and the ordinary work of holding things together. He said yes. Luna did not look surprised. Neither did Mara. Petra reached down and let Trouble sniff her hand, and the dog's tail started going immediately. What followed was not simple, because nothing worth having ever was. Cole finished out his season with Ortega, and the old rancher shook his hand and said he had seen it coming even if Cole had not. The small adobe house was left behind. Cole packed his tools in his bedroll in Trouble and rode south with the three women to the place where their band had settled, a wide valley between two ridges where the water ran clean and the land was good. The bounty hunters who had tied the women in the ravine 10 years ago were long gone from the territory. Caldwell, the rancher who had sent them, had lost his land in a court dispute and moved east. The land he had tried to take was back in the hands of the people it had always belonged to. That was a justice that had come slow and without drama, the way real justice usually did. Cole built a new house, larger than the adobe. He used timber from the ridge and adobe brick and learned from the men around him who had been building this way for generations. It took most of the spring. By summer, it was standing solid, with a long front porch that caught the evening wind and a good view of the valley. Life in the valley was nothing like drifting. It was harder in some ways and easier in others. There was always work. There were children in the settlement who started following him around within the first month, curious about the cowboy who had married into the band. He taught them to saddle horses, and they taught him words in Apache that he practiced badly and made them laugh. Mara cooked in a way that made him realize he'd been feeding himself wrong for 40 years. Petra was a healer who kept her own counsel and never wasted a word, which he came to respect more than almost anything. Luna ran the household with calm authority that left no room for confusion, and a warmth that left no room for doubt. He was not passing through anymore. He was somewhere. He was present in a way he had not been since before he could remember being any other way. There were hard days. There were arguments and silences and moments when the distance between his world and theirs felt wide. But there were also mornings on the porch when the valley filled with light and Trouble lay at his feet, and all three women were somewhere nearby doing the work of living, and he understood that this was what a life actually weighed. Not danger or distance or the miles behind you, but the specific gravity of belonging to something that would still be there tomorrow. One evening near the end of his first year in the valley, the gray-haired elder who had looked at him in the canyon a decade ago came to the house. He was very old now and walked with a stick, but his eyes were the same. He sat on the porch with Cole, and they drank coffee and watched the last light leave the ridge. The old man said something in Apache that Cole did not fully follow. He asked Luna later what it meant. She said it meant approximately, "The man who chose not to shoot has finally stopped running." Cole looked at her. He said he had not known he was running. Luna said most men who are running do not know it. She said that was the difference between leaving and arriving. You only understood one of them from the inside. He thought about that for a long time. Trouble came and put his head on Cole's knee. The night came in soft and wide over the valley. Somewhere in the house, Mara was singing something low and steady. Petra came out and stood at the edge of the porch looking at the stars, the way she sometimes did, quiet and complete. Cole Reyes sat on that porch in that valley and felt the full weight of life that had chosen him back. He had walked into a ravine once with open hands and a gun in the dirt and had not thought twice about it. He had not done it for reward or recognition or the hope of something returning. He had done it because it was the only thing a man with any decency could do when he looked down and saw people who needed help. But it had come back, not as debt, not as obligation. It had come back as something rarer and harder to name. 3 women who had watched him from a distance for 2 years to make sure he was still worth finding, who had ridden a long way not to thank him, but to offer him something, a place, a home, a life that did not move unless he chose to move it. He had said yes with one word, and meant it completely, and every morning since then had been proof that the word had been the right one. The hawk was back on the eastern pasture the next day, turning its slow circles. The fence he had started mending was long finished. The valley was green from the spring rains, and the cattle were fat, and the children were loud, and Trouble was chasing something through the brush, and all 3 of his wives were alive and well and permanent and real. Cole Reyes was not passing through anymore. He was home, and that truth, quiet and without ceremony, was the most extraordinary thing to happen to a man who believed moving was the same as living. It was not. Living was staying. Living was the porch and the hawk and the dog and the valley and the 3 women who had ridden far to find him.